was kind of like what Luke was talking about earlier, where like the hedonist can feel happy, like there's a happiness one derives from pleasure or something like that. Whereas to achieve a state of happiness, to me, seems more like to achieve one's potential in some weird way, or to kind of to like flourish is perhaps the wrong word to use, but something more more along those lines and less kind of basic. And in terms of like the argument that you don't really know whether or not your friends like really do or do not like you, I would say that logic would point to the fact that they do, simply because it would be hard to envision a scenario where someone would put up with you constantly, a whole group of people. It seems to me rationally, if one thinks about the idea that your friends don't actually like you but are only hanging out with you for some like weird, convoluted, like, that doesn't make any sense. Because it rationally doesn't work. Why would these people, if they don't like spending time with you, most people who don't like spending time with people don't spend time with them. So I find it hard to kind of come up with a scenario in which, and I'm sure you can. I'm not saying you can't, but I'm just saying that I think it logically and in terms of reason that it doesn't really make much sense.
Okay, Caitlin?
I was just going to say that with the Newton example, I don't think it's necessarily true that like just because some of his theories were like later proved wrong, that necessarily means that he wasn't happy, because like it depends on what it was that like made him happy or made him feel fulfilled. Like, was it like being right all the time, or was it like, obviously some of the things he said were right, but also like just like talking about the things and like trying to figure some of the stuff out that he did later like lended itself to different discoveries that may not have been made, and like I don't think that sort of discounts it. It's like, oh, it's all a lie, just because like everything that he discovered wasn't exactly true.
All right, let's do last comment. Who wants it? No one? All right, cool. Oh, Annie.
Well, no, just to return to the argument about whether it's like perceived happiness or feeling of happiness versus actual happiness, I think that just, okay, taking the friendship example and assuming it works, then I think you are, like Krat says, I agree that you are inclined to say he feels happy, except I think I like his reasoning, because there is a pretty clear distinction, at least to me, between that feeling of happiness and real happiness, because behind everything, there's nothing that makes it real. If your friends don't actually like you, then everything that you're perceiving isn't real. When you step back and you think, if you are the person that friends don't like you, and you don't realize it, you think you would assume you're happy, and he does feel happy, and I don't want to discredit his feelings, because I think his feelings are genuine. It's just the external circumstances in his case invalidate his happiness.
Should we move on to the next one, or do you guys really want to see this?
I was going to say that the when he was talking about the happy versus hapless, like being fortunate or kind of just having things go his way, that seems to be like a good way of looking at it in the objective way, as opposed to in his subjective thing. You can see that, okay, right now things are going well and he is lucky, but it's lucky that he's still happy, because if he finds out some piece of information, that would completely unstabilize his happiness, or his subjective feeling of happiness would be gone if some tiny thing changed.
Cool. All right, everyone good? All right, question. What?
We'll probably say the same thing.
Yeah. So question 2. Are we benefited by these standards? Can we say that these standards provide pleasure? Okay, that was a question. Can we say that they promote happiness?
Who actually thinks that there are objective standards, by the way? Maybe that would help us. Is that like 6 of us?
Yeah, it's like one. All
A
right.
lot of people get it. So I guess the second question is for the people who think that there are standards, right?
Well, sure, convince us.
Either subjective or objective standards. It doesn't really say. So it's not just objective
Well,
standards.
yeah, but these standards was kind of
Well,
rough.
I think
Yeah,
even if
we could look at both. Yeah, not everyone reads.
Yeah.
we phrase it to be like, if given like an ideal of life or something like that, which could be subjective or objective, does this ideal give you pleasure, or is pleasure something that's detached and caused by other things? Like whether or not we think the objective steps are more important than your subjective desires, things like that. I think it's a weird question whether your ideal is about what would make you have like a good life or a happy life has anything to do with what just gives you pleasure.
Or are they Aristotle's standards?
Just do one.
I say let's do Aristotle standards, just because I think this.
Also, is the video still going? That's great.
I hope so.
But I think
Yeah,
Kraft's
it's going.
talking about like our standards, like our modern societal standards for happiness.
Any objective standards.
Any other?
But he also
Well, like,
says that like
reasonable
we don't really know what any of the standards are. Like isn't that his like problem at the end? Is like we don't like even if we wanted to say that there are objective standards, like how can we say what any of them really are?
There's some who suggest like you shouldn't be contemplating suicide all the time.
Hey, Brennan.
I was gonna say, I guess as far as standards go, whether or not you believe in subjective or objective standards, the fact that like you believe in standards all means that there are some basis like these are certain things that will lead you down a path of, fulfillment and happiness, and these are certain things that will lead you away from that. And if you try to live your life even up to standards, regardless of whether or not like there are standards that the entire society or the entire universe should hold constant, or there are standards that are just your own, you're going to try to lead a happier, more fulfilled life that way. So in that sense, they are beneficial just because they're making you struggle. Like maybe it's just like you really want to. What?
Is it like they promote more positive thinking or more productive thinking?
Yeah, they promote more positive thinking, and they also promote more positive actions, because if you're thinking positively and you're striving towards something that's positive, then you're going to be performing actions that lend themselves to that.
Okay, Annie?
I think actually Kraut's problem has more to do with his lack of definition for happiness than rather finding out what standards would promote that. Because if he knew what happiness was, it'd be kind of easy, I think, from that point to kind of say, well, these are the certain things I need to do to achieve that. For example, like if happiness really equals a super good body, then you know how to get there by working out. So I think the problem is more that Aristotle nor Kraut really define what happiness is, and that's why it's hard for them to come up with concrete standards.
Sorry. Oh, Willis.
I just want to read out what he actually says. When we say that someone is living happily, we imply that he has certain attitudes towards his life. He is very glad to be alive. He judges that on balance his deepest desires are being satisfied, and that the circumstances of his life are turning out well. That might be helpful.
What page?
Oh, sorry. That's page 170. Second full paragraph. In the middle.
I'm going to make a case for objective standards, just because I think that I don't really understand what a subjective standard is. Because to me, like if it's a standard, then more than one person needs to ascribe to it, or needs to be able to work towards it. Because standard, I think that's kind of the definition of standard, is there's more than one, right? You get standard deviation if you average everything, right? I actually don't know how standard deviation works, so that may be completely wrong. But anyway, to me, a standard implies a degree of objectivity, because a subjective standard just is like a goal for yourself. And if no one else subscribes to it, then it's nothing more than something personal. And if everyone has different subjective standards, what's the difference between saying that there are no standards at all? So I would make the case for objective standards, and I think there are objective standards. Like Will mentioned briefly, like the idea that we aren't all constantly thinking about killing ourselves. Like I think that would be a decent example of like an objective standard of happiness, maybe. The idea that you're not constantly thinking about suicide or self-harm.
All right.
Well, I think there's still a question of what distinguishes objective standards from subjective standards. And is it just the method of obtaining them? Like, are we saying that objective standards are just standards that we've just established by scientific means, or